So, first thing to be done is approval of the agenda. Agenda 1.
Motion. Second.
Jason Robo has been deemed ineligible. And that came from a letter from the Vice President of Student Affairs Office. Mr. Robo is out of compliance with Executive Memorandum P07-01, which is minimum academic qualifications for student office holders. We are not here to deal with Jason Robo's eligibility. That is outside the realm of the Elections Commission. Let it be known that no violation of the code has occurred, and that this situation is not outlined in the Constitution or the code, so it's kind of a unique...
The Elections Code.
The Elections Code, yes, sorry. So we will not be nullifying the election because no violation has been made. The Elections Commission shall maintain an impartial attitude towards the election and the election issues. We will move to the public comment section. Start with Tony.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you guys very much. I think you guys have done a great job with the election. I think all the candidates did a very good job with this, and I'm honestly very proud with how this turned out. I'm speaking on behalf of and with Sofia Pereira for these elections results that we have here today. I'm really hoping that the Elections Commission would consider actually reholding the presidential portion of this election, including Sofia Pereira, Crystal Cheney, and Luke Ferrari, due to the fact that one of the candidates was disqualified mid-election, and there were, I don't actually know the full number, but I can assume that it's over 9 votes, that there were over at least 9 votes cast for Mr. Robo, which was the difference between Sofia Pereira getting 2nd and 3rd place to qualify for the runoff elections.
I was overall displeased with the process of the whole system of voting. The fact that there's no like sort of paper ballot in any way to vote for my candidate, or in the ways that some did not have like write-in candidate approval. I mean, like some I couldn't just write in my own candidate who I wanted. Some were just like you can only click on that one person. And also, I would like to really ask if this commission could wait for the appeal of Robo's eligibility, because of such a large amount of voters who voted for Robo. He is supposedly 232. That's leading voting. I mean, there's only so many off of what's his name? Luke's votes. So that's really should be considered. I mean, and also because of his eligibility status, people may not have wanted to vote for a candidate who had unsure eligibility status. So I mean, in case Robo with sure eligibility status would have even more votes.
It's ridiculous that somebody has to do math to find out how many votes I got. I mean, it's plain as day. It's easy for somebody to extract. It should be on there regardless of whether or not I've been declared ineligible. Also, from what I understand from a conversation I had with Stephen Butler, this has never happened before. I mean, ineligibility declared during the election. And I fought like hell to not have to be have imposed upon me a disciplinary hearing. I also see very strange kind of conflicts of interest and backdoor politics in a few different ways. One, Tyler, I think, sits on your Elections Commission, it appears, and he testified against me, and has also written my articles of impeachment, majority of them from what I understand, and at one point said I didn't kiss AS's ass, and that's why I was impeached. And so I think this is very bizarre and unfortunate. The fact that administrative oversight permeates this process also tilts it in a strange direction, and that's an unfortunate consequence as well, something that I've advocated against. And I think it's bizarre that also that our admissions website says this is truly a student-led campus, quote, and the student-led campus and the student-led commission is having imposed upon it ineligibility by administrative oversight, which what I feel was definitely a witch hunt. And the first time that a CPU use policy was applied to an auxiliary on campus, which also doesn't have the same fail-safes and such installed on those computers. And so, I mean, without getting into too much detail, that's just kind of the gist of what happened with this ineligibility. It's a disciplinary thing. It's also kind of odd, too, that this eligibility criteria is named specifically, quote, minimum academic qualifications for student office holders. And that's the name of it. And it nowhere says disciplinary sanctions or anything of that nature, and that the way that this was imposed upon me during the election is rather bizarre. From what I understand, also back on the conflict of interest, not just with Tyler Smith being part of AS, which I think is kind of weird. You know, a nonprofit, somebody who's paid, has taken a stance against a presidential candidate by testifying against them. That Rachel Rodriguez also, as a member of the nonprofit body of AS, has anybody but Robo on her Facebook account, and so she is campaigning against me, and I think that that's inappropriate as hell. And so I think that there's a nonprofit abuse here, and that there has been violations of the code in some ways. I do ask that, you know, that there is a tabling of this. I have a right to appeal this eligibility, and so without me being able to take that path, and also that this ineligibility was imposed while Stephen Butler was at a conference in Long Beach and not accessible, is a problem. And then other things that I have qualms with is that I repeatedly have tried to get a staking permit so I could stake, and every time I went to plant ops, the person, the bureaucrat in charge of signing my form, that additional layer of inhibiting process by which I have to, you know, get stakes up or I lose my $30 performance bond for this election, that person wasn't there either last Friday or on Monday when I went to the plant ops office, and I wasn't able to get the form processed until Wednesday. And when I got the form processed on Wednesday, the guy made copies of the form but didn't actually sign it. Then I had to bring the form back to have it re-signed yesterday morning, and I wasn't able to have my stakes up in time. So I really believe that if I was supposedly, you know, like 6 votes short, and I should be included in this runoff election, that first of all, I believe that I would have had more votes if the staking permit process wasn't an inhibiting factor, and then also that this ineligibility imposed by dictatorial administrative oversight is inappropriate.
I'm disappointed that Jason was found ineligible in the middle of the campaign, or excuse me, in the middle of the voting process.
Any further comments? One of our members of the commission will be communicating via writing, so that's fine. Our packet states eligibility ruling will take place within 3 days of filing. Okay. From what I can tell, we have 2 options. Hold all to be true, as is, and proceed with a runoff election between the top 2 vote getters, which would be Crystal Cheney and Luke Ferrari, or revoke the general election position of president with Luke Ferrari and Crystal Cheney on the ballot and Sofia Pereira as a write-in again.
I don't support either of those options. I feel administrative oversight of Dr. Butler in the Student Affairs Office made an error in judgment in barring Jason Robo from this election. And I guess a course of action that apparently I'm hearing is going to be taken is appealing that ineligibility. Jason's behalf is going to do that. I don't really want to push this off any longer. Sort of terrible timing, a lot of nonsense, a lot of drama for some reason.
If there's confusion and the runoff needs to be held, it has to be held within 5 days of the general election. That's correct? Mm-hmm. When would a possible appeal, if any, be finalized?
The granting or denying of that appeal would be expeditious.
I think that the students deserve to know who the president's going to be, and we get 5 days for our code to do it. So I think we should make a decision today.
Other things that I might have missed mentioning earlier is there were rumors of ineligibility and expulsion that may have affected, so that was a lack of my privacy being recognized until this point. And then also the point that the alleged VP candidate Jesse brought up earlier about the 3 days, I think that nullifies the student affairs imposition of my ineligibility on this, as was mentioned earlier. And so I think that you guys should include me as a runoff candidate, because that action of ineligibility is null and void, since it should have been addressed within 3 days of my filing, and that the nature of which they imposed it during the election is very unethical and lacks integrity.
Whoever was elected for admin vice president, Nikki Kovalchuk, would then officially become president, and therefore then you would have an individual in the office of president fairly immediately after the election occurs that was not elected into that position by any students, and we are dealing with that issue of lost students' votes for a presidential candidate.
I'm yielding the floor to Jesse, but I have to read his comment because he's observing the day of silence. He said the administration has no business meddling in student elections. And I also have a comment about it, and to second Tara's kind of comment that we do in fact have procedures in place so that if in fact he's disqualified, a person would be immediately put in the position of president. So the associations would be left without a president, but they would have someone who is possibly not their choice for president.
With Mr. Robo's disqualification, that quite a few votes aren't actually going to be heard.
And now we have to decide how to administer that process in the fairest ways, if that makes sense. We don't determine who is and is not eligible within this commission. We determine what is the fairest way to get students' voices heard.
I'd like to say that I think it's a farce of a process if there is such oversight, and that I don't know why there would be an election if people can be disqualified in the middle of an election.
Yeah, I make a motion that we do a revote with all three candidates.
Any candidate at any time, whether they are in office, out of office, whatever, if someone is ineligible based on the academic, the minimum academic qualifications, then they aren't eligible, and that's what that means. So,
Given the ridiculousness of this situation, again, that sounds like a fair thing to do. And I know I'm trying my best to overlook Jason Robo being deemed ineligible during elections, despite whatever probationary hearing was happening, despite whatever was said in that. Yeah, I think the student vote shows that some people at least want him there, and that's pretty important. And if I'm off subject, I apologize. This is the only opportunity to have this written down. Students voted. There was meddling from administrators. Dr. Butler can grant what's the word I'm looking for? Exception.
I agree with your sentiments of wanting the student population to have a student leader that they want. I agree with that sentiment. They clearly have voted, and he is one of the top vote getters. But also in the fact that to remove yourself from the situation and say this person is simply ineligible. It doesn't matter if, you know, a student who is ineligible got every single vote for president. They cannot actively take on that role because of guidelines and stipulations within this institution.
They make an exception to the requirements for unit load, maximum allowable units, residency, and GPA. Are those the only 4 things that exceptions can be given for?
That's what's stated in the policy.
So we're under the interpretation that it's something that falls outside of those.
You know, disciplinary action that was imposed upon me being used to infect and distort and poison democracy on this campus. And I think that if, like, you guys do not look at this 3-day policy thing that Jesse mentioned, and also recognize that nowhere in this policy does it talk about disciplinary action, it is a recognition, I believe, that when you look at that there is arbitrary power being used to usurp the student voice.
Okay.
Part of me thinks that said probationary hearing might have waited to make their determination upon disciplinary action towards the end of elections to make something like this awkward moment happen.
Speculation is fine, but that speculation doesn't help the process that we're in right now.
I'm not about to help this process unless I see the process worth helping. See huge errors in this. Just given, like, we're here trying to make a decision, and yes, we can call the vote right now and make a runoff happen. But then given the circumstance, the appeals process that is more than likely to take place, then we're going to make a decision that's going to be acted upon while it's pending, while we're making this decision. Just seems like a clog in the process. I'd like to yield the rest of my time to Jesse's words that maybe Amy would read. if you're into it.
He asked how many votes would Jason have gotten if it had not been pulled from the ballot, and my answer to him was, we don't know that because it was pulled during the.
His name was never pulled from the ballot. It is, I believe, or it is public information. I don't have the exact number, but I believe it was 200 and something.
Like the chair, to make sure to try and strive for all discussion to be directed towards the motion on the table, so the process can go forth.
When would the election be held if we waited for Jason's appeal process? Is that correct, Jay? And then wouldn't it be too late in the semester for us to actually handle that if the process?
Jason's appeal process is outside the realm of the Elections Commission, so we don't deal with that. Although it is a pertinent matter, we don't deal with it.
And I think people need to understand this is not something that can be appealed.
Okay.
This is what Steve's referring to right here.
Okay. Under extraordinary circumstances, the campus vice president for student affairs may make an exception to the requirements of unit load, maximum allowable units, residency, and GPA. So perhaps they're implying that none of those things just stated can be appealed. Any other discussion as to the motion?
Those can be appealed, Keith.
Though, yeah, those can be appealed. We'll move the motion to vote. That we do a revote for all three presidential candidates in the general election format, and then if no candidate has the majority, we'll move into a runoff. So, all for the motion.
Aye.
Aye. Passes? Or noes? Abstentions? Motion passes. We'll therefore have a re-election next Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Should ask Stephen Butler if he's ever given exception for disciplinary things in the past, though it doesn't outline it in his policy.
That's not pertinent to the
Not the
motion.
time.
It is, considering what you just based that vote on.
Yeah. So what were those dates again?
Tuesday and Wednesday.
Where's the fairness?
When you can talk, we can talk. This isn't effective, okay?
Where's the fairness to the students that voted for him? Where's the fairness to that percentage?
So I have a right to appeal to not be on the ballot then? What's the point in that? This is garbage. I'll be back to get my camera when you're done with this sham.
I agree.
So, I don't know, so now you would vote to approve the results of the election.
Okay.
Not
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
I wasn't amending the motion.
You were amending this old business. No?
No.
Smith Moore moved to approve the results of the election on the 22nd through 24th. And I had a motion moved by Smith, seconded by
Oh, no, I didn't vote on that.
No, you seconded Smith's motion
Okay.
to have a revote of the three candidates, which is an amendment to the main motion. So now you vote on the main motion as amended.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Paul?
Was it too late for? No,
No.
never mind. Never
No.
mind.
Discussion?
No, you're not gonna like it. You're not gonna like it. Just vote. Fine.
Any announcements? And I will.
I have an announcement. This will be heard of, a lot. This makes AS look really bad again, which there's no reason for that. It's making this board look bad when this board did not make a decision of such magnitude about Jason Robo.
I'm wondering about the transition.
I didn't make it.
I'm laughing at it.
Honestly, can't understand. Like, wow, this. I think they sort of worked up their minds and did what they did. But at first,
I'm sorry, Jason. That sucks. Bullshit. Talk to me later.
What I was trying to think is, I really appreciate your motion to make it as fast as that.
You did a really good job. You're good, sir.
That was fun.
Thanks, Keith.